So I'll try to. I realized that I should already quite change the title, right? And I think probably that's the first step you do. It's incrementation and improvements and continuous improvement. That's all about product discovery, right? And product management. Because I realized that my title was quite complex. But first, hey, my name is Timoté. I'm the CEO of Dualoop. We're a consulting firm specializing in product management, product design. I've been working in the tech industry for the past 13 years. And 2 years ago, I decided to shift a bit my career and land into consulting. And the main reason was just because I wanted to share my knowledge, which I'm trying to do today. Obviously, when I try to talk about qualitative research, everyone say, please, cut the bullshit. We know how to talk to our customers. And you're right, we're all doing that. We talk to customers, we do observation, we do interviews. Sometimes we prepare interviews in our head. So you may ask yourself, okay, but what's wrong with this? Like Jack. Well, the thing is, there's not that many things wrong, but the thing is that we tend to always reinvent the wheel. Why is that so? It's just because we talk to each other, we try to improve, we discuss, we start doing Google queries, and usually what we do, we say, hey, what are the great tips, and what should I ask my customers when I interview them? Well, is that really the question that you should ask yourself? That's probably what we discover today. Because what we tend to forget is that product discovery is actually, it's not a new thing, it's not an art. It's rather the art of combining science, combining sociology and psychology. Because what we forget is that we are doing product discovery because we want to understand a group of people sharing certain particularities to actually solve the problem through technology. I know. My issue and my point is that we tend to ignore close to 120 years of progress in qualitative research. It started in the late 19th century with one person named Max Weber. Just look in the scene, everyone, I see some people nodding, not that much. You're right. Thing is, Max Weber, already in that time, we changed the way we were approaching the science and the research. He was the first one saying that we should take more time and stop just collecting data and facts, but actually trying to analyze them and understand them in their complexity. So he was advocating to understand the meaning, the motives, and the reasoning and the intention behind acts. No, we're not in an history class, don't worry. But what I'm trying to do, and my point is that everything is about risk mitigation, right? Why are we doing product management? Because we want to build software. Why are we doing product discovery? Because we want to build the right software. We want to make sure that we are solving people's problems and actually generating value. So it all starts by finding the right problem to solve. The one that is important, urgent, massively spread, and actually still delivering business value for both our customers and our company. And once we have identified the right problem, we want then to try to find the right solution. You may have heard earlier today about Marty Kagan's 4 weeks about values, usability, viability, and so on and so forth. That's it. But still, how can we make sure that we are doing that the right way? Well, my whole point is that you're doing things already. You're talking to customers, you are doing research, but are you doing it in a scientific way? That's what we want, because we want to mitigate the risk. So we want to have a process or method, a research method, that is actually measurable, repeatable, and continuous, with the intent of generating business value for your customers and for our company. And to do so, we use qualitative research. Qualitative research, it's about uncovering insights, patterns, and context. It's about collecting all the data that we can in their complexity. I understand, I know, it may sound complex, but I will try to make it very simple for you. The things that we'll do, and my point is that you will keep on doing exactly what you're doing, but slightly differently. And the difference is in the method. And you don't need to know everything about qualitative research. There is only one method that is really close from what a product manager is doing. It's what we call grounded theory. To make it very simple, product management is only about starting from the point where we understand, we identify an opportunity or problem. There are things that we know, and there are also things that we don't know. Out of the things that we don't know, we want to identify the one that worth being known, the one that we should know, right? You heard it before in many different talks. There are things that you can't search and you can't research for everything. You should do the one that are really valuable and will help you to uncover enough so that you can take a better, enlightened decision. And once you know the one that you should know, you will define a method, a research, and experiments. So there is not that much to know about grounded theory. Just a bit of definition, some research questions, some sampling methods, and so on and so forth. Grounded theory is really close from what you're doing today, because the principles that you are collecting data, and throughout the process collecting data, you analyze them immediately. And by learning more, you are improving your research and so on and so forth, up until a moment you say, okay, I know enough about the problem to take a decision. So, still following? Good. Remember, where do we start? And that's true whether you have nothing and you start from a blank page or whether you have an existing product. You start from a question that you ask yourself. You start for a problem. But most of the time we forget to take the time to actually clarify that problem. What are we trying to solve? What's the problem that we're trying to uncover? Actually, that's what you call a research question. You usually have a topic. The topic is usually related to an objective that you have or your strategy. Then you start defining your research question. So what are you trying to uncover? And then you identify hypotheses. Your hypotheses are actually predictions about your research and what you will find. Obviously, there are some artifacts about what is a strong research question and a strong hypothesis. But for now, just keep in mind, strong research question is obviously something that is specific, focused, and feasible. Obviously, that's also relevant for your company. And a strong hypothesis must be just simple, concise, not containing any assumptions. That's usually the one that is overlooked. And relevant, again, for your research questions. Once you have a research question, the first thing you do, you start to talk to your customers. But actually, how do you know which customer you should speak to? That's what we call sampling. But remember that in qualitative research, we're talking about non-probabilistic sampling. So it means that you can't determine the probability for someone to be part of your sample or the amount of the people that you will interview or that will be part of your research. Which means that it's completely opposite to quantitative research, because here our goal is really to understand the scope of what is possible, all the different variations, analyzing people in their context, and not having an overview and any statistics. And the small difference again about what you will do, because you already select people, you already talk to people, but the selection matter. And you have 4 ways of selecting people. Either it's purposive, snowball, quota, or convenience. Purposive is when you try to, the type of artifacts about the people that you are going to interview. Typically their age, their location, their rank in a company. That will define the people that are looking for. And you will proactively search people with certain criteria. Snowball is when you find the first person and you ask that person to refer you to others. Quota is when you say, oh, I want to have some people in certain industry and other people in another industry. Because your hypothesis is that eventually they will behave differently. And the convenience one You shoot out in the street or in Slack channel and say, yeah, I want to interview some people about that topic. Who is interested and who is open? Usually that's what journalists are doing. We have usually there is only 3 research techniques that are used in qualitative research in grounded theory. Interviews, observation, and focus group. Interviews are usually one-on-one. So you have a researcher and a person that will be interviewed, and you have 3 types of interview. You have the open one, semi-guided, and closed. Closed is very simple, it's the one that usually you don't use. It's really close from a quantitative research with some differences. It's usually used, for example, outside of voting apps. You have some political scientists that are there asking those type of interviews to actually try to predict results of voting before it's actually public. The open one is the one that you usually use when you're at the very early stage of problem framing phase, where you have no information, you don't know exactly what about, you just have a vague question. So you start by that, usually interviewing an expert that will give you a better view of the landscape, and then eventually you shift to semi-guided interviews. Semi-guided interviews are very specific because you would have an interview kit that will allow you to eventually uncover more precise informations. Observation is my favorite and usually the one that is overlooked. Observation can be done incognito or in the open, and it can be done synchronously or asynchronously. It's substantially changed now because thanks to technology, we have some screen recording tools such as Full Story, Microsoft Clarity, and so on that allows us to really spy on people and look at how they behave in our application. Obviously, when you are early and you don't have yet the tool, you may decide to go incognito and observe. You may take the job of an accountant for a couple of days. You may go into a bar, observe how people are pouring beers if you want to improve that process. Focus group, the third one, is probably the most difficult to use because focus group, the challenge that some people in a group may highly influence the group dynamics, so you may reintroduce bias. But it's still also very important, very useful when you want to collect information and you want to leverage group dynamics and memories and collective memories. So, remember, it's not that much different from what you were doing, but what you're trying to change gradually is helping you to understand that there are some more technicity behind. If you look at all the slides, the few names and the few word concepts that you haven't heard about, now you know, and then you can just Google. There's a simple checklist that you could start creating and thinking about, what should I do before my research? What should I do during my research and after? When you are using, obviously, semi-guided interviews or focus group, then an interview kit will be important. We can't cover that now because we could just take a couple of hours talking about that, but it's probably the most important one. Second, during the interview and after the interview, there are some things, but we'll cover them afterwards. One key content, because quite often you say, okay, but when do I know that I can stop my research? When have I collected enough information to move forward? That's what you call saturation. The saturation principles defines when the data that you're collecting from your research are not adding additional knowledge related to your research question. That's where you know that you reach saturation. It usually happens in product management between 3 and 13 semi-guided interviews, for example. Personal experience, obviously, in qualitative research, we say it is between, I think, 3 and 999, so pretty big. Triangulation is the one that's usually also quite overlooked, but still very important. Remember, everything we're doing is about mitigating risk of being wrong. But the thing is that if you only rely on one method, if you only rely on one data source, you're just taking the risk of introducing bias. So we do recommend to triangulate your research, whether about the method, whether about the interview, the researcher, or about the theory that you're using, about the methodology, the data, or the investigators I just mentioned. But if you want to make it very concrete, it could look something like that. You may have collected information from your CS team and as well as gathered information from feedback platform, then you are observing people within your application, seeing what are you doing, and then you're combining that with semi-guided interviews. The three of them helps you to have different perspective on the same problem, that ensuring that you are not making any mistakes. Just introduced before, bias. Obviously, everyone thinks that, yeah, we know bias and then all the about when we do interview and how we can influence something. But the thing is that we usually forget that there are 5 types of bias. They start at the design of your research. When you are writing your research question, when you are writing your hypothesis, if you are doing it wrong, your whole research will be screwed. And most of the time, that's where people fail, because they don't have clear problem to solve and things they are researching. If they don't know what you research, you'll never find the answer. And then that's how usually research go really wrong. Selection, obviously. Remember the 4 types of selection: snowball, purposive, quota, and so on. Assuming that you leverage snowball, you go to one person, you ask that person to refer you to other one. You may introduce bias, because you may realize that all your people look the same. So you may think that you reach saturation, but actually you don't. It's just because you took the wrong people. Data collection, obviously. So where if you are only relying on your memory while not recording what people are saying, or if you're translating things, you're introducing bias. And publication, that's my favorite one. If you write a 20-page report and you're storing that on shared drive or in a Google Drive, no one will read it. But if no one is reading your research, it's pointless, right? Reflexivity. Everything we discuss about is just to keep in mind that you have an influence on the research. You have your beliefs. You have your past experience. You have your own patterns. It's important to keep that in mind so that you can reflect on your influence on your research. And keep in mind, as we said, it's an iterative process. Continuously, you'll start doing interview, you'll do a first interview, you'll collect information that will eventually directly change your perception on hypothesis. Change and realize that you must change your research question because you're focusing on the wrong thing. And that's important to immediately react. Quite often people say, oh, if I want to reach saturation, I have to do between 7 and 13 interviews, so I'll do 13 interviews and then I'll see. No, just do one, collect information, improve, change, and up until a moment where your research question becomes clear, your hypotheses aren't unchallenged, haven't changed anymore. That's where you know that you reach your saturation point. So, if I have to simplify and make it very simple, it's everything you're already doing. You usually start sometimes with a CEO interview that will give you a problem or an opportunity on the market that he's seeing and say, okay, then you start crafting the first research question. Sometimes you have no clue and you have very limited information, so that's getting very vague. First thing you do, start collecting data, doing a bit of desk research, and then talking to an expert or in the field. And then you start having a better view. You may refine your research question. You may decide to stop because you're going into the wrong path. Or you may try to start writing a hypothesis. Once you have that, you start doing additional research. You start interviewing people. You start eventually observing certain things. Up until a moment, you say, okay, I have a clear problem. Let's try to find the best solution. And then you start again. You interview again. You do your research. You start defining some experiments. You start putting things in production. By putting things in production, you realize and you learn again, because you will observe the impact of what you're doing. And once you know that, eventually you will decide to say, okay, problem solved, I move to the next one, or I will uncover a new problem, and then you start again and again. Hopefully. But there is one thing that we haven't discussed about, it's the communication. You never, ever communicate enough. There are different reasons to that and different why it's so important. Every data that you collect is not only for you. You're not doing the research for you. You're doing the research for others. So if you keep information for you, it is pointless. You must embed those information, the right place into your organization so that you are taking data-driven decision. So centralize your documentation, make it accessible by everyone. Refer to that research every single time that you have the opportunity. But also recycle information. If you have screen record, if you have quotes, if you have testimonial, take that information, share that with your marketing team, with your sales team, and help them to already sell better. Help them to market your product better. Don't wait, don't keep that for you. And probably one that is really important, because I've seen questions before I say, hey, but where do we start? How can we make it? How can we convince our organization to actually do discovery? Well, prove your point. Be the storyteller in the company. Deliver great products. And then link that to your discovery and prove them the impact that you are having even, and try to find those low-hanging fruits. Communicate about them, double down. Prove that what you're doing has value and help you save and avoid making mistakes. So yes, doing the same, but still doing it differently. Because now, hopefully, you'll realize that you are doing the right things, but not necessarily the right way. So just by understanding there are some concepts behind, just understanding and being aware of them will help you to reflect on what you're doing and use the right techniques at the right time and the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Timoté. Thanks for all the information you share with us. We have received many questions on Slido, and let's start with the first. How do you know you've done enough research?
Okay, as we just say, I think the research process is actually to identify the things that you don't know. And at some point realize that you know. Then you know because you just want to take the right decision. And as soon as you realize that you have enough information to move forward, that's where you know that you've done enough research. And I want to really be clear because I want to double down on that. It's not about, from what we say, it may sound complex, but you may do that in 5 minutes. You may craft the research and answer the thing. It's just about the process of thinking about what are you doing, what are the barriers that you are introducing. But you can go fast. You may do certain research in a day or in a week. Depends on the complexity of what you're doing. But it doesn't have to be long.
Okay, thank you. Georgia asks, my company doesn't allow me to reach out to customers and interview them. How can I persuade my leadership to start doing this?
Don't ask permission, just do it. I mean, who can prevent you to speak to your customer, right?
Should or can engineers and designers take part in this research? Is the PM the only one responsible?
I think the two previous talks already talked about that. Yes, of course, everyone should be involved. So it's not about the product manager. Product manager has one perspective. I always invite you to think about, you as a product manager, you're responsible to make it happen, ensuring that we are mitigating the risk. Does it mean that you have to do everything yourself? No, certainly not. You're not a superhuman and you only have 40 hours a week, depending on the country and legislation. But keep in mind, you must leverage them. They have experience, they have expertise. It's a group effort to figure out the right things to do in the right way. It's not on your hands, it's about everyone's hands.
Okay, how do you know you've done enough research? Sorry, it's the same. Darius asks, great talk. As a former academic that used the grounded theory in the past, I now find that applying it to SW development is too slow and cumbersome. Any tips?
I think you can't go from where you are to the perfect process in just a day. I think what's important is just to try to do things 1 hour. Just take 1 hour in your week and try to introduce a smaller change. Prove that it's bringing something valuable. Of course, we're not academics. Of course, it will never be perfect. But as long as we have the intent of improving and doing the right thing, and while still mitigating the risk, so keep in mind, that's the most important things. What are the things that you should do to mitigate the risk of being wrong? Sometimes you can take shortcut, but what I always invite you to do is to write down the shortcut that you're taking, because eventually If you're wrong, at least you can go back and learn from that and improve.
How to keep track of all the insights you're gathering, especially if you're getting valuable feedback not directly linked to the initiative?
Well, there's many good tools about that. I think you're right, and that's the most difficult things. You'll start collecting loads of feedbacks. Teresa Torres will talk about that. And we are doing continuous discovery, new uncover things, and not relating to what you're researching about, but are still important or valuable for your organization. Obviously, there are great tools for that. Link that, store them. You can use Notion if you're a small company. You can use product boards or any really advanced tools. You have Usage, for example, for data research if you want to really go to the next level. So many tools, and I post some. I'll share some later so that I can go a bit more in details into that.
Okay, thank you so much. Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Time is up.